Is an active rook generally better than a passive knight in the endgame? Have you ever wondered about the dynamics between an active rook and a passive knight during the endgame in chess? This is a fascinating topic that can shape the outcome of a game. Let's break it down. In chess, the endgame is a phase where fewer pieces remain on the board. The goal often shifts to converting advantages into wins. Here, the rook and knight play very different roles. The rook is a powerful piece that moves freely along ranks and files. It shines in open positions, controlling key squares and supporting pawns. This mobility makes the rook a formidable force, especially when trying to checkmate the opponent's king. On the other hand, the knight has unique movement. It jumps over pieces, which can be advantageous in certain situations. However, the knight is generally less effective in open positions compared to the rook. In closed positions, where pawns limit movement, the knight can become stronger. Yet, a lone knight cannot checkmate an opponent's king without help. Now let's consider what makes a rook active. An active rook is well placed and exerts influence over the board. It can control vital squares and support pawns effectively. In contrast, a passive knight is poorly positioned and not contributing to the game. This can limit its effectiveness, especially in the endgame. When it comes to practical applications, an active rook usually holds the upper hand over a passive knight. The rook's ability to control ranks and files allows it to create threats against the opponent's position. However, if the knight is well supported and the rook is restricted, the knight can still play a significant role. The presence of pawns on the board can also impact this dynamic. With pawns in play, the rook typically has a clear advantage. It can support pawns and threaten the opponent's position effectively. Without pawns, the knight's chances improve slightly, but the rook still remains favored. At the highest levels of play, understanding the subtleties of rook versus knight endgames is vital. Players focus on maximizing the rook's mobility to create threats against the opponent's king or pawns. They also recognize scenarios where a knight can be used to create counterplay or defend against rook attacks. In summary, an active rook is generally more effective than a passive knight in the endgame due to its mobility and ability to control key squares. However, the knight can still be a strong piece if it is well supported and positioned in a closed setup. Understanding these dynamics can significantly impact your endgame strategy.